Whether we're farmers or we're consumers or eaters or whatever, if we think about how can we support the uptake of carbon that's extra or not into the soil, because guess what? It grows much better food. The landscape is more resilient. It grows better people.
Charlie Arnott is a pioneer in regenerative farming. He is an award-winning 8th Australian generational farmer, educator and advocate for regenerative farming and wellness practices. His family farming business developed under Charlie's guidance from a conventional industrial farm working against nature to a biodynamically principled and holistically managed farm partnering with nature.
The responsibility that I realised I had was I'm responsible for the health of people buying this food, and who makes the decision? Mum and dad. Who eats most of it? The kids. I didn't want to keep contributing to the food system with shit food that wasn't nutritious, The environment in which a child lives is really, really important. And the air they breathe, Bush talks a lot about the epigenetics, and you are influenced by the air that you breathe that has been through the lungs of an eagle.
Welcome to Chief Life, the podcast that cuts the crap with science-backed insights on health, nutrition and performance. Get expert advice, actionable tips and everything you need to take control of your health and live your best life. Let's get started.
Well, Charlie,
Brock,
welcome.
thank you for having me in this wonderful studio.
It's a proper studio, and it's a little bit different to the way that I know you like to do things, which is looking out at a wonderful vista and being engaged with nature.
You've got me. There's you in front of me.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
I know having the grass, the grass in the background there.
It's as close to nature as we could possibly get on this instance. But no, thank you, mate. Welcome officially to the Chief Life podcast. Off the top, I wanted to sort of acknowledge you and your input, I guess, and being the catalyst for Chief and our sort of starting point of our regen sort of journey. It was I went back through my emails, it was 2019 that we first got in touch and started speaking, and we just got our, I call it the Regen Starter Kit. So we'd watched the Alan Savory TED Talk. We'd read the Charlie Massey Call of the Reed Warbler, and we'd listened to the Charlie Arnott podcast, and that started our journey. Sort of tick the box, got the starter pack, got the T-shirt, and so I just wanted off the bat, just really wanted to acknowledge the massive impact you've had on Chief and our sort of starting point. So thank you.
Brock, that's a pleasure. I do remember that fondly and very vividly when you came to visit, because it was a very challenging time. I think it was December, it might have been January, and I remember the photos we took with our cows, and we didn't have many left at that point. We'd actually sold quite a few because it was very, very dry. And I remember the shot we took in the paddock, and there was grass, but it was pretty much dead. We'd retained ground cover. It was dusty and hot, and the cows were maintaining condition just. But that was the most recent challenging. Yeah, I mean, you call it a drought. I'd like to call them just extended periods of dryness. So you were there when we were making some tough decisions around, destocking, which we ended up doing in early February, and then this is 2020, and then it started to rain, like 2 weeks later. It's which is unfortunate, because if we'd known that, we wouldn't have probably sold. However, you've got to make decisions based on what you know at that point in time. So yeah, thank you for bothering to come down and check out what we're doing, and think that there was a useful thing to do. It was great, and it opened my doors to what you guys were doing and starting on, and what you've done since. And I've been watching your the development of your business and your products and your range and your people, and it's been really inspiring. It's great.
Well, I think that the interesting thing is that since that time, there's been such a marked difference in the way that we approach that product development piece. I think that it's interesting looking back on it now, and sort of, that was really the fork in the road for us in sort of what we could do and the supply chain choices that we could make, and how that impacts obviously the environment, but then more broadly us as a business and how we sort of make those decisions in the business with that North Star of how do we, really move forward the idea and the concepts behind regenerative agriculture, and how do we do that in a way that speaks to our consumers, and how do we educate those consumers around our journey as well. So a big thank you, mate. I really, really do appreciate it.
To just jump in just quickly, I'm going to struggle to not think I'm doing my own podcast and ask you questions. If I ask you too many questions, just palm them off. Okay?
No, that's fine. It's a conversation. We've done that. And
I should have checked back which episode it was and which season. It was probably season 5 or 6.
I think so.
Years ago now.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to return the favour and get you on ours. Yeah,
I haven't done a podcast. Actually, you know what? I don't know. I've done a studio podcast. Oh no, I have. I've done a couple a long time ago, but I'm very impressed, and you've actually quite inspired me to. And I'm actually liking this format too, front on, because I usually side by side, and I battle with my wife about. She goes, no, you got to change. You got to do front on. I said, no, everyone feels comfortable, but I'm going to reconsider that. This is fun.
As long as the
person is as attractive as you, Rock.
Thank you.
Well, if I had a head like a robber's dog, then I might be challenged.
No, it's good to be able to do it, and I'm appreciative of you coming into the Big Smoke and doing this with us. So I'm interested because obviously you get to see and talk to so many different people, and the way in which and maybe it hasn't, but your definition of regenerative agriculture, and if that's changed over the past sort of 8 series of doing the podcast and the involvement with the community. I'm interested to understand if that's changed at all.
Great question. It probably has, and it's probably been through more my experience with people and their scenarios and my own. Not a great deal, though, I have to say. Like, I think that, like any principle, they're pretty, you don't really change principles because they relate to values and so on. But I think that, like, my original and somewhat still definition of regenerative agriculture, I kind of have a simple one and a more complex one. The simple one is, anything that builds the quality and quantity of soil, and that comes, it needs people, it needs animals generally. You can't really improve the quality of soil without animals, literally while they're alive and while they're dead. And there's plants, there's sunshine, all sorts of things. So simply increasing the quality and quantity, if you're doing that, you're on a regenerative kind of a journey yourself, and as is your farm and business. Because at the end of the day, the soil's, the be all and end all, isn't it? It does so many things. And to focus on what we want and what we want to improve in the soil, that's a principle of regenerative agriculture. And the more complex one might be, and stealing from, you mentioned Charlie Massey there before, he talks about the 5 landscape functions. And one is solar, sort of cycle, and then the mineral and the biological and the hydrological. So there are 4 somewhat biological ones. And then the 5th one, which again, funnily enough, is biological, is people. We can't exclude ourselves, our responsibility and our impact and our management from doing that. So the other, back to your question, if you are improving any of those 5 in any way, then you are regenerating, or you're in a. I quite like using the word generative, because regenerative feels like a bit like going back to where maybe the way it used to be, or regenerating as in you're getting it back to a point. And I like the word regenerative agriculture because it allows us as managers of landscape and businesses to have our say, or have our, to feel free to use our imagination, our creativity, and get it to a place that we feel, as the stewards of that landscape, is appropriate. And if we're not empowered to do that, then and if we don't feel confident we're never going to get things back to the way they were. Okay, so as as Whiteys have been running around for 230 plus years, 40 years now, whatever it is, and things look very different, obviously. And so I don't believe it's in anyone's best interest, the landscape, society, whatever. I dare I say, it applies to all countries to try and get it back to that state, because there's just been too much has happened. Population increase, culture, the whole thing. So what we do is, in my view, is we use practices that are going to get it to a point that we feel it needs to get to. So in Australia, in the context of Australia, I'm a big fan of exotic trees. There used to be a lot more deciduous trees in this landscape than there used to be than there is now. And so I plant a lot of deciduous trees, and that contributes to lots of those cycles we're talking about. So that's a pretty long way to answer that question, Brock. But I guess in terms of how it's changed, I think, I'd have to say I went out a bit hard and I was focusing on landscape and biology more than the business, and I went cold turkey when I started, right? And I wouldn't suggest that to anyone. And so there was financial hardship or impact on doing that. Right? And I'd said, if anyone wants to change, is big or small, don't just go, I'm going to throw away all the chemical and I'm going to throw all of the stuff in the bin and I'm just going to go cold turkey, because there will be a financial impact. Forget the cultural, which there always is, and to step into it slowly. We can go into that later, but that's been a big epiphany. Don't be dogmatic, and I have been quite dogmatic at times, but I think that I, as a manager of a business, I'm a much better manager of, holistically, the finances of the business, the people in the business. And they're often the things that we can jump on board, the biological, the animals, the plants, the soil, but it doesn't function without dollars, cash in the bank, and it doesn't function without the people making decisions about all that, because the cows will need moving. The multi-species pasture crops will need to be put in the ground. The people need to be paid. The team, they need to be happy. And the wonderful thing about a farm is that we have this resource. I'm a bit tentative in saying resource. It sounds like I'm sort of commoditising it, but it is. It's this wonderful asset that you can create a sanctuary for your family and for those staff. To have people who want to stay in your business because they've got a safe place to be, they've got a good income, and they believe in the business. That's where a lot of our staff live. Like you're in this amazing setup here, but you'll go home to this thing. You can demarcate, and so having a healthy business with healthy people in it is a really important thing. So I'm kind of darted all around that question, but look, it has changed, and I think it's healthy that it does. And whether it's regenerative agriculture or whether it's running, your business, I mean, if you're not changing, then you're dying, So I think it's just it's a good thing. It does take courage, and there's so much more in that. But I think I'll leave it there, bro.
No, it's good. I mean, and you touched on, I guess, your journey and where that kind of started in terms of the landscape that you inherited, essentially, or you took over custodianship of. Talk a little bit more about, I guess, the ways in which you started farming and those sort of methodologies, and how that changed over time. And you mentioned you went cold turkey there for a while, but how that changed, and then what is that evolution you see now, and what are those new things that you're sort of starting to explore from a farming methodology perspective?
Yeah, I guess we were very conventional. That's how I grew up. That's how Dad did it. Mum and Dad bought Hatton in 1970, 69, 70. I turned up a couple of years after that, and my life was really about the living on a farm, enjoying that. Nature was a playground, and again, very conventional. We sheep, cattle, cropping, cut hay. We did everything and did it pretty well, I might say. And so, with some different epiphanies and challenges, and breakdowns to have breakthroughs, we got to we changed things, and that came after I took over management in 1998. 5, 6, 7, 8, end of 98, yeah. And so I guess as I said, we went cold turkey. We applied a lot of practices then, and again, probably a bit soon. Like the tool, a tool in the hand of someone who doesn't know how to use it can be very dangerous. It can be a weapon. And we made some mistakes, but I guess we kind of within a few years we kind of worked out what we wanted to keep doing, what we found of use, and and ever since then we've been. I trust getting better. Grazing management. So it didn't take long to work out how not to graze pasture, right? And we went too far. So grazing management's totally again a principle of regenerative ag. At least having animals there, So and sheep and cattle, we chopped and changed. We sort of got rid of all our sheep, and our sheep are back and they have their place. So the grazing is important. Infrastructure. I'll get to infrastructure in a minute actually. Grazing management, use of biodynamics was something we picked up pretty early. Focusing on the people, getting the right people in the team. You just can't have staff, employees who don't believe in what you're doing. You're challenged all the time, literally. Like, I'm not going to go and do that. That's ridiculous, And so what else do we do? Like appreciating the value of soil and how it's it is the beginning and the end of everything, food and environment and health and everything. So look, there were some things which anyone can sort of look up that principles of regenerative ag that we picked up, as I was saying. And then just to answer your question, what we've picked up more recently, which I think has been getting back to the whole idea of change. We've been developing. We haven't dropped too much off. I think we've just been getting better at things. We're using a lot more tech, I have to say. Like, I'm not a big fan of tech if it without sort of being aware, it starts using you. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, not using you, but if you sort of get stuck in the whole headspace of tech's going to save the day, it's a silver bullet, that's not helpful. It's got to be a tool that can't, and it's got to be convenient, and it's got to save you time, and it doesn't always. You can pick stuff up and actually you spend more time in the office trying to work this stuff out than it's actually good for you. And you sort of want to go back to the paper and pen. So picking up tech, and we've been using MyGrazing for many years. It allows us to record grazing data and paddock sizes and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's fantastic. 7 years of data, 8 years of data in there now. We are now picking up EID, which is electronic identification, tags for cattle. We've been doing it for a while now. Sheep allows us to, in our management, to record individual sheep, which is important when you've got ewes lambing and you're scanning and all, pregnancy rates, all that sort of stuff. So that's been a really good pickup of technology. Auto drafting stuff, so we can run sheep through this machine that basically reads the tag, and we put the parameters in and they get drafted left, right, centre, depending on pregnancy status or weight or whatever. It's fantastic stuff, and that is really helpful tech. So, and that's been a function of it's now more available, right? Now I've got this gear FarmBot, right? It's got these little monitors that sit on all your tanks, and it tells me when the tanks are running dry. So I get a notification of when it saves death basically in the middle of summer if you're not around and cattle don't have water. So we've been pretty judicious in what tech we pick up. It is not cheap, and you sort of there's a cost to it, but there's also a cost in some cases of not doing it. So that's something we picked up. We've got right into natural sequence farming now as well, Brock, in a big way in the last couple of years. And for those who haven't heard of that, it's essentially a mechanised, physical way of reinstating the hydrological function of landscape, which is it's about knowing what to, looking at a landscape, seeing how it used to function hydrologically, using mechanics, like grader blades and excavators to recreate areas in wetlands, contouring so that we're basically retaining a lot of the rain that falls on our land, because we have created the most amazing drainage system on the planet here in Australia. There used to be rivers and creeks, absolutely, there has been forever. But what we managed to do with our agriculture, our sort of European agriculture and overgrazing, has created this drainage facility, which we can't afford. We're the driest continent on the planet. We got to retain every drop that falls. So what we've done with the help of Peter and Stuart Andrews, and actually Stuart McWilliam, who's been an operator of machinery and is a magician with what he's doing, as are the Peter and Stuart Andrews, is recreating that hydrology in the landscape with contours. And it's about riparian zone rehabilitation. It's about using, existing dams and ponds and making, mechanically. And I actually struggled with this for many years. But why can't we just grow grass in, fence off creeks and grow grass and let that happen? I mean, as Stuart Andrews said, we just don't have bloody time. It could take 50 years to get the outcomes that we might want by just using fencing. And we did that for many years, But now we literally, Stuart and others, with their machinery, and it costs money, are reinstating that hydrology. And I think it's a bit anecdotal, but I think it's working, and there's there's a lot more to it. So back to your question. That's another practice we picked up, and I'm really excited about that. And what I want Hannah Minnow to become is somewhat of not a model, but just an area demonstration site. We've done a run their 4-day course a couple of times. So what else have we done? We sort of chopped and changed enterprises for a bit, trying to we're following the trend a bit, but now we're very clear on what we want to do with our animals. Keep it simple: merinos, dual purpose, wool, meat. Cattle, not crossbreds, sheep anymore, not fat lambs, but just keeping it simple. Now again, that's nature wants to always move to a state of more complexity, which is great, and that there's so many benefits to that. But from a business point of view, simplicity is really important, because let nature get complex, let nature do its thing, and that's how it works best. And if we can mimic nature in the paddock, and actually leverage what it naturally wants to do, that's a principle, But in terms of our business and what we make decisions on, how many sheep we've got, how many cattle, and how many enterprises, and what we're trying to overlay in this natural environment, that's got to be simple. Mm-hmm. We can, because it's almost like the complexity of man against the complexity of nature. It just doesn't work. We've actually got to be the simple creatures in this equation, and that it supplies the complexity, and we manage the simplicity.
Yeah, and I mean, I was actually blown away when we come to visit you, and the amount of erosion that had taken place on your neighbour's land because of that rain, not being able to actually hold that rain in. So, I'm sure it's probably evolved since I was last there and being able to see it, but yeah, the use of those yeoman lines and the contours, and being able to, harness the water that we do get, the small amount that we do get, and better direct that into the stores, I'm sure is making a huge difference for you. Is there a way that you can, obviously you've got the technology to measure the amount of water, I guess, that's in your stores, but have there been other areas that you've been able to use data and look at, whether it's levels of carbon sequestration or other methods that you've seen that are, you're starting to see the pictures and see the, not just the anecdotal, I guess, evidence of these sorts of things working, but the actual data, the hard data behind it?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. With the soil stuff, we just had Atlas Carbon do some baselining, some basic baselining last year. So we've just registered for a carbon project, a soil carbon project, which I sat on the fence for a long time. I'd been, and I still am, somewhat against the commoditisation of carbon, because I think there's, and I was listening to a podcast about it. Oh, Tucker Carlson was talking to someone about it the other day. Anyway, it's with Bobby Kennedy Jr. That's right. Anyway, I think if anyone's going to talk about carbon, it needs to be in the context of soil and how we can utilise the carbon that's in the environment, whether or not we agree or not on not necessarily you and I, but the world about how it got there and should it still be there and whatever else. But, there's so much going on based on the commoditisation of carbon that is missing the point. Is missing the opportunity and not supporting the sequestration of carbon, which is a natural phenomenon that's been happening since the dawn of time, and how that can improve environments and improve the quality of the food we're eating or that's been grown in those environments. Like that, for me, is the important context for carbon. Stopping cows from farting and burping, I've got a real problem with. And that's, the simple thing for me, just to touch on that for a second, is if we look at North America, right? I mean, there's Africa and there's other parts of the world which had ruminants grazing for millions of years, God knows how long. In North America, there was about, they approximate 300 million bison and ruminant type creatures roaming around. And guess what? They fart and burp, right? And so what we've done in the last 300 or 350 years or so is remove all them, except for a few little ranches here and there, and replace them in terms of biomass with domestic bovine animals. And guess what? They're farting the same amount of, methane into the atmosphere and burping and so on. And so there's no real net change in the amount of methane that that North America's sort of contributing. But there is so much effort being put into, we've got to get that bloody methane out of the environment. I mean, for me, that's the twigs, right? That's that, and there's, call it greenwashing, calling it just, let's just make some money out of this, the whole thing. Let's make everyone feel guilty about eating a steak and eating a Chief bar because I just bloody encouraged a cow to fart or burp, and I'm actually contributing to the destruction of the planet. Like, it's complete bollocks. Let's just park that over here because that methane thing is such it's just not worthy of conversation. And if we're going to put effort into things, whether we're farmers or we're consumers or eaters or whatever, look, if we think about how can we support the uptake of carbon that's extra or not into the soil, because guess what? It grows much better food. The landscape is more resilient. It grows better people. And so, back to your question of data. So we're doing a carbon project, and for me, that's about recognising the impact we're making by putting more carbon in the ground. Now, how that plays out, I don't have to sell any credits that I am issued through improving the carbon in my soil. How that plays out and how I'll feel about that at the time, this remains to be seen. Because I still have a bit of a problem with people just going on to buy some carbon credits and just still keep pumping carbon out in the atmosphere. Back to your question, though, the data from them has been interesting because what I haven't done with that data is compare it to 30 years of soil tests with high FERT and people who, you do a soil test and they'll say, oh, you need all this and all that. That's something I need to do. But the results from the Atlas Carbon soil test suggests that we still got some room to go, which is great. Because it's a baseline and we haven't compared the previous data, we can't say, oh, we've increased it by X amount. But through pretty nifty tech, they've worked out how much more we can put in there. I couldn't quote it right now, but there's enough that we can put in theory, by doing what we're doing, to warrant a project on it. So that's interesting, So that's like, okay, well, I can still improve. There's still room to improve. I actually don't know there's much of a limit. I don't know where this stuff tops out. They say when the pioneers came here and they rode their horses through the landscape, that they were sinking into this sort of amazing layer of mulch and humus and so on. So which would have, I don't know, we're talking 20-30%.
Really?
Organic matter, Right. So look, we're not going to get back there, when that's not going to happen. I don't think, unless we can time travel. So, but knowing that we can make a difference to the resilience of our business and landscape by using that data effectively, that's one big thing that data's been really helpful. So from that context, it's been great. Knowing and being more across our animal health data, more so weight gain and pregnancy status. That's been really useful because we can literally. It means being a little bit more intensive with our operation, but it actually is much more effective. You know, we know like last year. Well, like most farmers do, they scan, but like being able to work out whether ewes were got in lamb early in that cycle or later in the cycle, the weight gains of animals, so many parameters can then allows you to make some good sound business decisions, to sell, to buy, and that's helpful for the people who are buying those products if you're selling them to stay alive. So that tech's been really useful. Don't know what else sort of techie stuff. I mean, just the adoption of apps like Voxer.
Yeah, well, you tell me about that. You're so with it, Charlie.
I'm so 2025.
Well, I mean, going back to that water piece, and it's really interesting because I think, obviously, you spoke about the demonization of meat and certainly methane production, and water is the other one, which is often demonized, right, in terms of the amount of water required to grow beef. And I've been really interested to understand the role that organic carbon level plays in soil and its ability to retain water in Australia, in an environment like Australia, which is obviously more or less arid. I know there's some data around I think it's for every percentage point of organic matter in the soil, I think it increases by 120,000 litres per...
140,000 litres, yeah.
Per hectare?
Yeah, that's per hectare. And that's, I mean, I don't quote me on that either, but yes, like there is a significant... The soil's ability to retain moisture, and when is significantly improved with the increase in organic matter. It's like you're building a bigger sponge at the end of the day. And what does that mean? Well, it means that whatever's growing in that sponge has access to a greater amount of water in any given situation. That can't be a bad thing. The Nicole Masters says that the most limiting factor in your soil is air. We think it's nutrients, or water or biology. No, it's actually air, because where there is air, there is room for water to reside, right? If water can get in there through rain and so on. So if we can and essentially organic matter builds a bigger sponge, which means there's more pockets of air where water can reside, and in that environment, biology can thrive. So any way that we can improve the amount of water in that soil is going to be helpful. Now that can be, essentially at the end of the day, plants. Plants provide the biology. Apart from, I guess, manure used to be, it's still plant. It's just been through a ruminant. So the plants, plants build soil. Soil grows plants. And without plants, any environment that doesn't have plants, and a variety of plants, I'd have to say. So one could argue that, in a monoculture there's plants. It's like, yeah, sure. But in that environment if they're grown in a monoculture, they're no doubt, in most cases, being treated with lots of chemicals, and practices that aren't going to be helpful for building soil. I mean, there'd be very few places that is monoculture, conventional agriculture, that's building carbon. I'd argue that there's probably carbon's being reduced. So, the more plant diversity we can have in a cropping situation, in a pasture situation, in any sort of situation, with trees and shrubs and grasses and forbs and legumes and the whole thing, accessing more water, because and this is this lovely cycle, the more organic matter you can build through encouraging the diversity of pastures and vegetation on that soil and in that soil, the more that soil can support more pasture and trees and shrubs. And it's just this lovely positive cycle. And what is organic matter? I think it's like 40-something or 50-something% carbon. So what's it doing? It's pulling it out. When a plant photosynthesizes and it's pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, about 40% goes into above ground vegetation, 30% into below ground vegetation roots, and then the other 30% is sugar, carbon, and that's feeding all the biology. And that's the sort of rough breakdown. And it's those three, apportioned, parts of carbon that is pulled out of the atmosphere that is growing the plant, is contributing to other plants to grow essentially. So those little bugs, they're fed by the carbon, the sugar around the roots of those plants, and they get little messages. I need a bit. Here's some sugar, buddy. I need a bit of phosphorus. Can you go and get some? And what happens? These, through fungal hyphae and communication, and God knows. I mean, we're learning more and more about it, but we're tip of the iceberg. Goes and gets a bit of phosphorus and gives it. There's this beautiful communication and symbiosis in the soil. And so, again, back to your question. So the more organic matter, the more air pockets, the more water, the more life, the more biology, the more plants, the more animals that can be sustained, managed on that landscape, the more food that can be grown, whether it is the vegetation that is eaten by humans or animals, or the meat that's produced because those animals have more to eat. So it's a pretty important kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard you speak obviously about that sort of moment for you around recognizing that you are part of that food system, and that played a big role in, I guess, the way in which you now manage that land, and I guess the relationship that you have with food. I'm really interested to understand that a little bit more, and the way that you view yourself as a farmer as part of that food system and its relationship, healthy environment to the produce which is being created.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about responsibility, isn't it? We as farmers, even in a conventional sense, feel somewhat responsible for our environment. It's not in our interest to go and let erosion wash our soil away or blow away wind erosion. It's not in our interest to have sick animals. It's not in our interest to have an environment that's not producing products, that's not productive. And I guess for me, the turning point was, many years ago, I'm sure Angelica, my wife, had something to do with this too. It used to be normal for me to go and get up every morning and kill stuff. That was my job, right? And at some point, I got a bit sick of that, and I realised I'm not just killing stuff. I'm probably killing myself a bit too every day. I'm exposing myself to toxins and chemicals that I had been using for some years. And excuse me, it's just from my silly phone. But things are. In the conventional sense, there's much more chemical use now than there was when I stopped using it. There's more chemicals, there's more application, there's more reasons why we need to spray our food and our land with chemicals. So, but I got to a point where I didn't want to do that anymore. And what did that mean? It meant I had to change, I had to take out or stop doing the things that required that, in my head required it. And I also thought about, well, who's eating the food that I'm producing? What's the quality of that food? Because as farmers, we generally, in a conventional sense, we go, oh my God, as soon as that thing leaves our farms, thank God we've finished. We've got genetics, we've bred these animals, we've carved them, land them down, and we've somewhat finished their cycle of life on our farm. It's a relief to get rid of the bloody things. Give me some money for it. But when I got to a point, it was like, hang on, what happens next? What's the quality of that meat? We used to grow a lot of crops, and we used to use a fair bit of chemical. Again, I'd say that if we did the same thing now, we'd be using even more. And there's no way I'd bake a loaf of bread with the wheat I grew. There's no way. And I come from a long line of bakers, right? So I wouldn't do that, because I know the shit was used to grow it. And I think it's even worse now, because nowadays using desiccants like glyphosate on wheat and other cereals, and I think even on canolas and things now. Not that I'm at all a fan of canola, but we used to grow a lot of canola. And now that is sprayed within days or weeks of harvest to desiccate, so you can plan your harvest. You're not sort of challenged by the rain and the seasons quite so much. And so what happens? That doesn't break down in a matter of days or weeks. It's on the grain. And what happens to that grain? It gets turned into bread and biscuits and pasta and all sorts of stuff. And you only have to look into, follow Zach Bush to understand the impact of glyphosate on humans. He's a doctor. He knows this sort of stuff, And it's not just him. There's so much science around that now. So, the responsibility that I guess I realised I had was to, I'm responsible for the health of people buying this food, and who makes the decision? Mum and dad. Who eats most of it? The kids. And so, I didn't want to keep contributing to the food system with shit food that wasn't nutritious, And so again, we went cold turkey. We stopped everything, years ago. And I have to say, over the last couple of years, we've got better. When I say better, we've got more serious and more intense with our sheep operation. And also this is our potentially our fifth wet spring in a row. Like, this has not happened I don't think it's happened in Burrawa in ever. 5 years of reasonable seasons. And that's been very challenging for all sheep producers with different worms, and barber's pole worm is one particular one. It's very hard to, on a broad scale sort of farming operation, to control that, we've found. And so we've actually introduced a few drenches, like normal drenches, but that's been a bit of a challenge for me. But I also realise that if I'm going to maintain profitability, do it well, and still able to produce, we drench these ewes, it doesn't mean we're going to drench those lambs. They're going to be sold for something. There's every season is different. And so we have introduced some of those. And dare I say out of necessity, because, I'm not going to pretend that we can't run a business without that. We don't spray chemicals on the landscape. We don't spray thistles anymore. We don't do the stuff that our animals do not eat chemical. Some of them get a bit of drench every now and again, and that's to make sure they don't bloody die. If we were running 200 ewes, we could probably manage it, 300 ewes, but if we've got thousands. And so that's been a bit of a challenge for me, to be honest. But in terms of the general, what we're doing to the environment and what we're actually selling to people, we can stand up and say, these animals have contributed positively to the environment. They will contribute positively to your family. And, it ebbs and flows how much we sell of our products directly to consumers. It depends a little on season, depends a little on the enterprise mix we've got at the time. Last year we sold a huge amount of lamb through a butcher shop in Goulburn, and it was all clean. We specifically didn't touch them with anything, because we know we're going straight to someone. We've got to stand beside that. We are selling some pork soon, actually. We've got so many pigs all over the place, so we're going to sell some of them. They're clean as a whistle. And with our beef too, like we don't eat anything. Like, my wife's been great in teaching me, as I said, about the responsibility we have as farmers to other children's health, other people's children's health. So back to your question, that's been the big epiphany, and that has changed the way we do things significantly.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that role as a father has sort of in some way informed the decisions that you make, or certainly the way that you manage that landscape, knowing that not only other people's children but your own children are going to be.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I didn't have children when I met Angelica. She had children, and so she was aware. Like, she was sort of, what is this shit that people spray? Like, how can people live there? And I know plenty of farmers who their wife and children leave the farm for a few days or a week while there's activity around, the spraying in a cropping, conventional cropping sort of sense. I don't blame them. I think more and more, they're more aware, and the women generally are, because they kind of, I know that's they're women. They kind of get that stuff. We're just like, oh, I want to kill stuff and do our thing. So it has changed. So I think there's been a big change in the environment, the toxicity of the environment that I want my kids to grow up in. Right. So we just took all that stuff out. No one has to go running for a week and hide while Dad goes and sprays the thing next to the house. That doesn't happen. It's never going to happen. What also has changed, I guess, Brock, in terms of environment is, what sort of environment do I want my kids to grow up in? Clean, yes, but with an appreciation of nature, where there's activity, there's play that's dangerous but done safely. Climb the tree. I just love it when I did post the video the other day. My 6-year-old I didn't know what he was. I went looking for him. He's in the garden. He's found a rope. He's thrown it up a branch, and he's put some knots in the rope, and he's climbing up trying to get into the tree. And it was just like just love that sort of stuff. You know, yesterday, day before Saturday, I didn't know who he was. I went looking for him. And sounds like I'm an irresponsible parent. Oh, I knew roughly where he was. And he was within the garden. It's a big garden, and I find him sitting on this thing that he just put across this creek, and he's just sitting there, running leaves down the creek, and then he's rounding up the ducks and the pigs and the things. My point being, you know, the environment in which a child lives is really, really important, you know, and the air they breathe. Zach Bush talks a lot about the epigenetics, and you know, you are influenced by the air that you breathe that has been through the lungs of an eagle, right? And when my boys and my girl Lilla, who's older, 14, when they are out there, and I know the air they're breathing is pure and clean as I can make it, but they're experiencing nature. It's still a playground, but they appreciate it, and it's teaching. It's the best classroom there possibly could be, you know. And Bobby Kennedy Jr. said some wonderful things the other day in an interview with Tucker Carlson. He talked about, you know, I can't remember the quote, but it was you know, to stuff with nature is essentially not allowing it to teach us and allowing it to influence us in the most positive way that anything on this planet could. You know, it informs us, it feeds us, you know, the food and the air and the experience that we have. So there's let's get rid of the toxins in the environment, but let's put our children in that clean environment and let them find their way, let them experience it, let them fall out of a tree. My boy was jumping off the veranda the other day, and he went over his ankle. He had a sook for a while, but he learned. He's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that quite so far, you know. And all these things are just so important. And getting back to the responsibility and the privilege of having a farm, we are able to do that. You know, we have the world's biggest playground. And so, you know, and that doesn't mean that parents in the city can't do a similar thing. You either get yourself to a farm, or you get you go to the forest, you go to the park, and let your children play, you know, and let them experience, let them find their own boundaries. And they will make mistakes, and they will get hurt, and you will feel terrible. And as long as they don't end up in hospital, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think there's so often we hear that idea of battling nature, right? Where farmers or you know, civilizations are trying to battle nature, right? Where so often we just need to get out of its way and let it sort of teach us rather than trying to battle it and trying to struggle against it, right? So
yeah, and that's it. I mean, as farmers, you know, as I might have mentioned before, you know, we I think in the regenerative sense, mimicking nature, getting out of its way a little bit. You know, we've got to manage environments. We've got to manage sheep, cattle, grass, but letting it do what it needs to do. You know, and just giving it the opportunity. Like a very quick, small example is just pasture diversity. You know, when we stopped grazing things and set stocking and just flogging stuff pasture, and we gave it windows of opportunity to thrive and grow, it still gets grazed, but in a very different way. It gets a long time to rest and recover. Then nature goes, whew, you know, okay, there's a new set of rules here now that nature can play with and play to. And it recruits things that need to be there. It has the ability, it always has had the ability, but if we give it that opportunity and step back a little way, and graze in dare I say, in a much better way, and give it that recovery time, it recruits things that needs to be there. So in our case, for many, many years, there was a grass called warrego. I call it warrego grass. There might be another name for it. I never saw it in my life. It hadn't probably been in that landscape for 50, 100 years. And in the last 5 or so years, we've seen much more of it. It's been there. We just needed to open that door, step back, and let nature in again, and go, right, I'm here. I've been, you know, and it's like, warrego, now it's your turn. It's the same with weeds, you know. Like, if we think weeds are, our attitude is that weeds are messengers, right? They're an indicator of management, good or bad. And we don't. So we've got plants that I used to classify as weeds, and the government does, and also, everyone thinks of weeds. They're just plants who are trying to tell me something, and it's my responsibility to read those messages or interpret them or not. And when I see something growing, I don't spray that anymore. I haven't for years. I don't spray it. I go, well, it's actually contributing to the environment in a number of different ways. It allows me. It's an indicator of how well I'm doing my job, and it's telling me that this land either needs to be penetrated with this deep taproot, accumulate nutrients for this deep taproot, or cover the land, right? And so, if I can listen and learn, then I can respond accordingly. And my response has been generally like nothing. It's like, okay, if I went and sprayed that thing, right, it would then die. Nature will recruit something else to do the same job, and probably a worse weed, and create more of a headache for me. So there's a succession in a pasture that's generative, that nature enables and manages. And again, I just got to step back, still graze it, still eat grass, still grow cattle and sheep, still make an income from that. But nature is our greatest business partner. We have bankers, we have accountants, we have bookkeepers, we have staff, we have, you name it. There's a lot of people who you would say are your partners within your business, and I'd suggest you should call them partners. But the biggest one we tend to forget about is nature. It's the most forgiving, compassionate, generous, all-encompassing, ever-present partner. And if we don't treat it well, it's to our detriment.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting the role. I remember when we came to visit your farm and the different species that you had, both good and bad, I guess, in inverted commas, right? And the way in which you really utilize, especially when you look at the role that some of those so-called weeds, right? And I think the definition of a weed is just a plant that's not where it's supposed to be, or
in a conventional sense, yeah. But now the definition for us is it's a messenger. We just have to know how to listen and how to interpret it and work out what is that actually telling me. And quite literally, there's many books that actually tell you if you've got fireweed, right? It's calcium. You've got a calcium deficiency. Yeah, that's very good information to know. Saves you doing soil tests and things. And so, absolutely.
And one of the ideas around regen is that it can work in a multitude of different environments. We're not having this sort of, like you sort of mentioned, this dogmatic approach around we have to kill this or this is going to thrive. Or you just got back from the States recently. How have you seen regenerative practices being used in those different environments that I guess differ from Australia, so varied in terms of their climatic exposure and what they're going through from an environment perspective?
Well, I guess getting back to principles, principles apply anywhere, any country, any scale, any environment. Generally you keep ground cover, you're not going to get erosion, wind or water. You're going to maintain activity under the soil. The grazing management, whether it's in the North America, it's in Africa, it's in Australia, short, sharp grazers with large mobs, and where those pastures are allowed to recover for a long period of time, has really good outcomes. It doesn't matter, and the more diverse, the better the outcome, the more diverse the pasture is in there. But by doing that, you will create more diverse pastures anyway. So it does, those principles apply everywhere. And again, on in terms of scale, whether you're doing like permaculture and you've got your little zones and you're grazing your chickens here and your pigs there and your goats somewhere else, it all applies. I saw in the States. I went to Will Harris's white oak pastures there in Georgia. And he's got pigs and chickens and cattle and sheep. Got a big operation there. And what a lovely bloke. Awesome guy. He's got his abattoirs there. So, again, I can see all those principles playing out there. The way he's fenced his paddocks, the way he moves his stock. And the people involved. Like, there's such an important... So he's got 140, 100 and something people on his payroll. There's a lot of community there. And he's doing such a wonderful job. So... I guess just thinking about that's a commonality across any of these situations. People are important anywhere, but in a regenerative sort of farming space, often you need more of them. Because you're removing mechanical sort of stuff and you're not using chemicals, so you might need more people. And that comes at a cost, but it also comes as it's an investment, and that creates culture and so on. So there's lots of culture there. I saw that, and most regenerative farms sort of have, I don't want to say better culture, but I guess it's a stronger culture, and more often than not, you get the people on the same page, you find your tribe. And there's, I saw that there at Will Harris's, Joel Sullivan's over there as well. The other two sort of main farms I went to, but lovely to see all those principles apply in different scales and different environments, different people, different goals and aims and so on. Similar visions, improving environment, supporting community, strong businesses. I want to get to Europe in the next year or two, and I have no doubt I'm going to see the same thing. Okay, it's a different species of grass and a tree, and the different cultures and language, even, and all that sort of stuff. But I think, it's a community that has been very. It was great to be in that community, even through, if I can touch on COVID just for 2 seconds. That was. Finding your tribe and finding the people who had similar thoughts on the management of all that was really wonderful as well, and that whole thing about you are the product of the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's so true, whether it's the way you think, the practices. I found in conventional farming, because I was one for many years, it can be quite competitive. Within industries and between industries and so on, and between farmers in some ways. And what I have noticed is, I guess maybe it's just part of finding your tribe, that those people that I spoke with and communicated with and hung out with and learnt from, they're my kind of people. Very comfortable, open-minded, very creative, very generous. And that's not to say all those attributes aren't found in the conventional farming world at all. It's just, I guess you become more discerning with who you hang out with and who you listen to and what you do. It's actually not closing your mind. It's actually opening your mind to a different world. And that's been very beneficial.
Yeah, I think finding those common values is really important. Whether it's in a community environment, whether it's in a work environment, even, I think there's some really interesting elements around, looking at the holistic management of a resource system, right? So if we're talking about an environmental system, yes, we're looking to try and holistically sort of work with that resource system. But I think that's also can be equally valued in a work environment, right? If we're talking about the holistic management of a resource, you can be not just human, it can be the whole, I guess, interconnectivity of the people in that system, right? And I think that's something that we like to talk about or think about here at Chief as well, is how do we properly look at this system of people and what we're trying to create and the values associated with it, and how do we create those people and build those people in that system. It's an interesting way to view, I guess, a business rather than looking at it from a natural resource perspective.
Well, I guess, people, what are people? They're the glue between, departments in a business, activities, and so they've got to be on the same page. Otherwise they won't create that symbiosis between those different departments or activities or projects. And so that's I guess one of the big parts of looking at things holistically, is that people still have to manage those things, and make decisions on how well they integrate and whether they should be there in the first place, that project or that part of the business. So I'm. As you say, Brock, holistic management can be applied in any environment. It doesn't have to be about sheep and cattle and grass. It is about looking at it all as a whole. And, to think of it as an organism, I think is good, because there's a lot of biology, again, the people, and farming, there's a whole lot more biology. The things you're dealing with are biological. So it is somewhat of an organism. And if we can think about that in terms of, different organs have different functions, in a business, there's blood, cash, there's different organs doing different things. And again, there's the brains behind it all, and there's got to be the heart. What is the heart? I mean, maybe the heart of a business is the values of it. What's the lighthouse that helps you choose who's going to be on the team? Who do you recruit? That's a really important thing to make sure they're aligned. Otherwise, they're just a cancer in that organism. They just grow bad vibes. So don't introduce that in the first place. So yeah, those are. I'm no expert on HM holistic management. Brian Wahlberg, who's we're not running with him. We're sort of helping promote a course he's doing at Bora later this year. He's as many other HM practitioners are, educators, experts in this. A lot of it's around decision making. What are the consequences? What are the resources you have? What's the vision? What are the hurdles, the bottlenecks? It's a really methodical way. I am by no means an expert in. Of methodically going through a system of decisions to get to, an outcome, an answer, or a solution.
Yeah, I mean, having had a few dealings with the Harrises over in Georgia and understanding and speaking to, I guess, a number of different peoples within that.
Well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just have to acknowledge that. Thank you, though. It was with Jenny.
Yes.
Yeah, who wasn't there unfortunately when I was there. But thank you.
No, pleasure.
It was one of our favourite couple of days there.
Well, I know when you put the call out, I think every second person said, "Can you please get in touch with Will Harris and jump on?" And so, yeah, we're glad we could do.
Owe you a free subscription to my podcast. That was the call out. So anyone get me in touch with anyone, then you get it. Well, I'll tell you when we've got it running. It's not up yet.
Very good. Well, happy to take that. That's lovely. No, but having had those dealings with the Harrises and White Oak Pastures, they have an amazing, obviously, an environment that they've created, but the people that they have in there and the community that they've been able to create and help not just the White Oak Pastures community, but all of Bluffton and their broader community has been fantastic. So
have you been? Yeah.
Not yet. No, I'm planning on going next month. So
really,
we'll see.
You are going to love it. We stayed in one of the little cottages in the house there at Bluffton, and 100 metres from the general store, which used to be a general store back in the day, but he has acquired over, and as he has most of Bluffton, which is just an amazing story. I love it. Anyway, Will was so generous with his time and his brevity and his office is the old courthouse, and it's probably twice the size of this room. So not very big. And there's still the table where the judge would sit, and then there's where the defendant and the prosecutor and all that other stuff. Anyway, that's his office. He's got shotguns on the wall. It's just a classic. It's inspired Angelica, my wife, to change our office at home, so I'm not sure how we go shotguns on the wall. But my point being that that was an inspiring experience. But the courthouse, right? I don't know when it stopped operating as a courthouse, but at the back of the jail cells, literally people would be hauled in there, tried, jail cell, and guess what was over the road? This big old oak tree. That's where people who were found, that's where they hung out of the next day. I don't know how long ago this was, but that was like, holy shit, I'm in the south. I'm in the deep south, I'm not saying it's a bad thing about down there. It's just like, wow, that's history. Like that's... So back to my point, you're going to love it. He is such a lovely man, so generous with his time, doing wonderful things. And I remember when we were leaving on the morning, he goes, "I'm not ready for you to leave." And he said, I had the worst. I used to talk to him in my version of a southern accent a lot just to take the piss out of him. And he said, "You have the worst southern accent I've ever... It sounds like you're constipated." Anyway, so you're going to love that. And there's so much to see. Good people there, good people.
If anyone hasn't read his book, It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend it on audiobook as well because you get to listen to him reading it.
I don't want to put it on 1.2 or 0.5.
Yeah.
But no, that's great. He's such a good yarn. So you're going to have fun over there.
And he is also has some amazing turns of phrase. I think you what is it? You can't ride two horses with one ass. Which is one of my favourite ones.
He has something about wetting your pants too.
Yeah,
wetting your pants to keep warm.
That's right. That's one of the good ones as well. And so you've obviously been exposed to all these amazing, environments, I guess, outside of the city environment. But do you have any sort of recommendation, I guess, for people who are city folk to be able to engage with regenerative agriculture? Or how do you sort of communicate with big city people about what their role is potentially in regen ag?
Well, I guess it's first thing to say is they do have a role. In their buying decisions every day. Sounds a bit cliche, but it's so true. You can choose to go to, I don't know, some generic supermarket and buy generic food, and you're going to have a generic life, and your kids are going to have generic health. Or you can go to the farmers market. There's some amazing ones like Everleigh Markets we go to in Sydney when we can and we're around. So many great farmers there doing wonderful things. Go and talk to them. Buy their food, and if you're struggling with the price of it, and often it does, compare. Of course, it's going to. You buy your generic rump from a supermarket versus something that you've actually spoken to the farmer and he's driven it down from his farm, whatever. It's going to cost more. But I always say to people, don't look at that in isolation. Like everything, have a holistic approach to your shopping list, right? Okay, can we take out the conventionally grown shitty chemical fruit and veg and meat, dairy, whatever. Let's replace that with other things. One for one kind of thing. Yeah, it might cost you some more, but let's look at the rest of the shopping trolley. Why are you going to the centre aisles of that supermarket? Stop eating the processed food. Don't feed your kids cereal for breakfast. Feed them some eggs and bacon. Give them plenty of protein. The choices they make and what they put in that trolley. There's a financial implication. And more importantly, dare I say, is there a health implication? Joel Sutherland says you got a choice. You either pay the farmer now or the doctor later. So if everyone took that up seriously, then that would be a much better outcome. Now, I understand people have budgets and they have distances, and then there's maybe not farmers markets nearby. I'm not saying you're a bad person for not doing that, but in terms of just thinking about it and thinking creatively around how you can source it. So there's farmers markets, of course. There's shopping online. Plenty of people are delivering, to your door, very good quality. I'm more familiar with the fruit and the veg, the meat, than the fruit and the veg kind of thing. But there's plenty of both. And again, if it feels like it's costing you more, and maybe it is, then what else are you putting down your throat every day or every week? Cut that out. There's one commonality, and this as well as anyone. There's so many diets in the world, right? There's carnivore, there's keto, you pick it, right? The ones that actually are successful, what does that look like? I'm losing weight, I feel better, my levels are better, whatever markers you got, you're checking. The commonality with all that is it's removing the processed food has the biggest impact, right? That's the 80-20. You take that out, that's the biggest impact of any change of diet, whether it's you eating more meat or more whatever. So if we can encourage and take that to your shopping trolley, I'm just not going to eat that shit anymore. Yeah, I'm paying a bit more, but I'm paying less. The theory of if I'm buying really good organic, biodynamic, regeneratively grown food, I'm going to need less of it. And it's probably a good thing we eat less food anyway, right? So there's that nutrition in there which should trigger the satiety, sort of function our body to make us eat less. But let's be more conscious about it. Enjoy every mouthful you have. Stop. Eat at the table. Turn the freaking TV off. Get the kids focused on that. Get them to set the table. There's a French have this great, the way they eat's incredible. I'm not that familiar with it, but I know there's a book about it. It's like, make it theatre. Make them understand. Not make them appreciate, but just like enroll them to the idea of appreciation and gratitude for what they've said. Some fantastic. You don't have to be a believer in God or a Christian or whatever to sort of have a thankful moment at the table. You can make stuff up. You can get a religiously based one, that's fine. There's plenty of amazing ones which are basically acknowledging an appreciation of the animals that are feeding you and supplying you with nutrition then and there. And whether you didn't die in at your hands, it doesn't matter. Like it did, and so acknowledgement, gratitude, those children appreciating that, and then make sure they go and bloody clean up and wash the dishes.
Well, yeah, I mean that would be great if that helped.
But no, that's you, mum and dad. That's what's normal in a household. This is not having a go at you or anyone. This is just, the reverence and grace and ritual for a meal is really important. It's the preparation. It's a pretty good skill to have. Learning how to cook food, laying the table. That's the church in which you're going to sit for the next half an hour, appreciating and giving thanks. Not necessarily to God if that's not what you're into, but just into the sacrifices made, the effort, and then we finish that ritual because we go and clean up because we're a family and we go and do that. I think it's really important and make normal those rituals of appreciation.
Yeah, well, the preparation for me and our family has been a key, and involving the kids in that preparation, because we all know how difficult it can be to get kids to try new things or maybe evolve their palate somewhat, but having them involved in the preparation of that food, they're so much more likely to actually eat it, because one, I think they actually do have that sense of pride in what they've been able to create, and I think that's we certainly practice that gratitude and the moment of giving thanks and allowing those kids to just take a moment to actually say, you know what, like I'm really thankful of whether it's the food, whether it's just something wonderful that they had in their day. I'm probably jumping the gun, but we actually do have a product that you and I are very passionate about, which is the Thankful for Farmers initiative and Thankful as an organisation. So depending on when this gets launched, we will have a Thankful bar.
Awesome.
Which is where derivative product. So I hope I'm not jumping the gun. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's part of, I think, one of the elements that we're looking at, not just the element of thanks, but also Saveful, right, which is their other amazing initiative, and the ability to negate or to minimise food waste through not just, I guess, for the consumer and what they're doing. There's some amazing things in the Saveful app that consumers can use to minimise household waste, but certainly from a chief perspective, we're also looking at minimising food waste at an industrial scale and through that food production system. So, yeah, we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do with Kim and Mike, and hopefully, depending upon when this is launched, the product will be available very, very soon.
Just on that one, just to somewhat finish that question, before I forget there, I guess, in a game we play at our dinner table, is we always ask everyone what their favourite part of the day was, which is awesome, and the kids love it, and that's quite a normal thing. So we're sort of getting people to think about being thankful for whatever it is, and if we play that game tonight at dinner with my family, I'm pretty sure I'm going to say my favourite part of today was this podcast. Having a chat with you, mate.
Thank you, mate. I will do the same.
No pressure. I'm not going to ring you up and say, how was dinner? What did you say? No. It's just I just think my appreciation of ritual, that ritual in particular, and that I know it's a bit of a well-trodden path, this gratitude thing, but it is because it's important, So back a couple of questions ago about what people, listeners, as eaters can do is, it's not like you should be bloody grateful. It's like, just think about that, become part of that story, because you're the last part of it, So being acknowledging that, the kids understanding that they're part of that story too, through the decisions mum and dad made, and the kids can start making decisions too. Like they'll go to the supermarket, they don't want that other cheap, crappy shit. They'll be making mum and dad accountable, going, why are you buying that? And look, there's another conversation about the education system and what they're learning at school, and how normalised can we make that in their lives, and how schools influence what they then bring home. but mate, it's more important what the kids take to school. I think that's the training ground that we at least can have some influence over.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in finishing up, Charlie, I wanted to again recognise the work that you're doing and just ask if people want to find out a little bit more about you, where can they go to learn more?
So our website, charliearnott.com.au, you'll find everything on there. You'll find links to the podcast, The Regenerative Journey, which you'll find also on you'll find Brock's interview there somewhere, Spotify, Apple, anywhere. We're on pretty much most things. We actually the interview with Kim I did earlier this year is going to be released next week. I think it is. Maybe it's this week even. So I'm not sure when this one's coming out, but have a look at that one. So that's the podcast, the website. I am, available to do speaking gigs, and there's a contact email there for people to, if they've got questions and queries, feel free. And also we have an Airbnb, Little Plains, which is there's a link, but it's a separate website. You can come and stay at our farm, essentially, old Federation home there. We're not sort of doing willy-nilly farm tours and things, but if people request one, I'd be willing to sort of, if I'm on there that weekend or that week and see what we're doing. Just go to the website. It's pretty much got everything there. My podcast, season 8, God, what I'm up to, season 8. Yeah, I think we're finishing that in the next couple of weeks. I've got a heap that I did when I was overseas, some interviews, which are just trying to work out how we sort of place that for season 9 and when. And there'll be a subscription model we'll be releasing at some point, probably between seasons actually, just to keep people chugging along through some stuff. It's basically going to be, Q&As I did separately to the interviews that are just for the subscribers, and I'll take little sections out of the main interviews for sort of extra vowel for subscribers, particular projects or concepts that we go into. So it's really fun. This has been a great experience, I have to say. I love loving the studio environment.
Thank you, mate.
This has been really fun. I think tonight will be my favourite part of the day.
Oh, mine too. Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Brock.
Thank you for listening. Let us know in the comments below what topics interest you, and don't forget to follow us.